Thank you so much, Antonia. Thank you so much, Guillaume, if I may. And thanks to each of you to be here. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be with you today, this evening. I must say that, as Antonia reminded a moment ago, we have known now for 6 years. That's my second time in Melbourne, and I am again so impressed by the quality of the accueil, the welcome I have here, the quality of the relationship between people, the interest that is shown towards ancient art, and including Musée de Cluny and its collection. So it's my pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to thank you for listening me to this evening. So, Antonia asked me to come again, and I'm glad to participate with my abilities to this celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Australian Tapestry Workshop, which is also a very impressive and I think important institution in this country compared with what exists in the same type of institutions in the world, including Paris Gobelin, for example. So that's also something I think each of you has to be proud of, I'm sure you are. So after those words of introduction, Antonia asked me to come and to speak about the lady and the unicom again, so I hope you will not be bored. But in fact, I accepted also because between last time, 5 years ago, and today, we had some works organized and carried on the 6 tapestries, and that will be for me the opportunity to introduce you to the work we have done. As Antonia said, the tapestries were not in so good condition. It was not necessarily seen when you visited the museum, but really they needed something to improve their condition, and that's what I'll present in a moment. And as this restoration, or conservation restoration operation was also the occasion for a new room installation, this will be for me a good opportunity to introduce you to the works we are planning and beginning to realize inside this old museum. So, maybe just as a summary to remind you, and sorry if I say again things you know very well, those tapestries which are in fact very famous, and maybe more famous in the world than they are sometimes among Parisian people, which is always a little surprising for us when we travel. And it has been the case here in Melbourne. So 6 tapestries, as you see, not exactly the same size, each of them with a lady, a unicorn, a lion, and for 4 of them also a younger lady. We call her in French la demoiselle. She is not really a servant. She is more a lady, a companion lady or companion young lady for the main one. Another particularity of those tapestries, which is obvious when you see them, and you can have a deeper look with this detail, is the fact that the backs are red and decorated with many flowers, which are either cut, either plants, with some birds, some other animals, and that's why they are called millefleurs. That's a way for the artists of the period, for the weavers, to illustrate, to evoke the natural surroundings in which the scenes are happening. Some words about iconography, which is one of the mysteries around those tapestries, and maybe those mysteries are one of the reasons of their celebrity. So, 6 tapestries, 5 of them rather easily can be interpreted as representing the 5 senses. Touch, the lady sighs the horn of the animal. Taste, she takes some fruit or some friandise inside a cup which is presented by the young lady. Smell, the lady is preparing a crown of flowers. The young lady is presenting a sort of plate on which those flowers are put. And you see in the back the small monkey, which is having a flower also and smelling it. Hearing, the lady and the young one are playing with this wonderful instrument. And you see that one is really playing and the other one is using the instrument. And fifth, the sight, you see that this time again, like in touch, the unicom is not only attending the scene, but she is playing really a role since he or she. Have you noticed that unicorn is more often a male, since it's a masculine name in Greek, in Latin, and in many modern languages. So maybe he or she is symbolizing a male figure. So anyhow, the unicorn is looking at itself or himself inside the mirror that the lady is just presenting. And the lion seems rather to be present, but not really interested by the scene which is represented. And 6 tapestries. So do we have 5 senses, or do we have more than 5 senses? And in fact, if you read the text, the medieval ones, but also the antique ones, dealing with the question of the senses, some of them make a distinction between the senses which allow us to have a communication with the exterior world, with other persons, but also with objects and with the world around us. That's what we call the material senses. The 5th one we have, the 5 ones we have seen before, touch, hearing, and so on. But those intellectual writers of antiquity and medieval periods also speak about the intellectual senses, in senses which allow us not to communicate with the material, the common world, but also to have an elevation of the soul, an elevation of the spirit toward another world. And among those senses, there is one which is described in the beginning of 15th century by Jean Gerson, an author which is not really very easy to read because he's a moralist, not really funny. But anyhow, he speaks about the 6th sense of heart which leads the other, so it's above the others. And the heart can be interpreted as a sort of intellectual sense, but also in the sense of human heart, human love. And that's typical of the period, that you can have several interpretations which nowadays would be in confrontation, but in medieval spirit, in medieval intellectual world, those significations which seem opposite, in fact, are complementary. So, sixth sense, which probably is the sense of the heart, with this inscription, mon seul désir, my only desire, that desire to be elevated, to have my spirit going from the material world to the spiritual world. So that's the interpretation which is nowadays more often accepted, and I think that's what we use more often to explain the tapestries to the visitors of the museum. But I also like to insist in the fact that what is important when you discover a piece of art, or when you visit a museum and discover many pieces of art, is that you have a personal contact with the work, and many other interpretations have been suggested, presented, and our desire would be that each visitor has this personal contact with the work, and one can accept other interpretations. The important thing is to have a personal approach of the piece of art. Another particularity of this iconography of the tapestries is the fact that maybe you have been impressed by the sort of calm, calm of the six representations. They give a very positive vision of the senses. When you look at other representations, allegories generally, first, the allegories generally are not female. They are either animals, either masculine representations, and very often they are rather either without positive or negative vision, but when there is a vision, in a sense, it's rather negative. And as a comparison, I show you taste, detail of the center of the piece, and an engraving coming from the illustration of a book which was written and published by print and illustrated by engravings, more or less in the same period as the creation of our tapestries. The Latin name is Stultiferae Naves, so the boats of the women who are full. And so the author is named Jocotus Badius, but which is interesting for us, I think, there, is that the fact that you see another illustration of taste with those fools. You recognize the way the medieval artists very often represent fool, whether they be masculine or feminine, with a sort of horns on the head. And so the scene is rather animated and not really positive. It's something completely different, even if the period is the same, even if the author of the design, of the drawing, is surely in the same context, Paris around 1500, and maybe same circle, same workshop, but a totally different type of vision. I think we can appreciate, comparing the two images, how the Lady and the Unicorn ones are positive and calm and maybe much more idealized, even if the work which is illustrated by the engravings is also something coming from imagination. Another example with sight. You can compare, for example, the two mirrors, which are exactly of the same design, but on your right you have something again very animated with these fool people going out from the boat, and something with many figures, many representations, and on the opposite, just this very calm and full of peace link between the animal, which is so nice to see and so concentrated, with relationship with a young woman. And yes, I was on the text above. I remind also. Maybe you ask yourself, from which tradition is this image of sight with the unicorn going to the lady and being so peaceful in relationship with her? And in fact, that's an interpretation of the tradition about hunting the unicom. Guillaume was saying a moment ago that there are many traditions and many interpretations of the unicom, and one of them, coming from antiquity but still alive during the Middle Ages, is the fact that this animal is very fierce and it's very difficult, and it runs very quickly, and it's very difficult for the hunters to catch it. And the best way is that, as it's attired by the lady and the virginity of the lady, to have a lady who attires it, and so it can be caught. So, as you see, it's something rather treacherous. But so this tradition about hunting the unicorns that you can find in texts and images all along the Middle Ages, you have here in a new interpretation, much peaceful, as I was saying, on this image. So some words also about style. As I was saying, we don't know exactly the author, but it's surely the circle of those Parisian artists around 1500. And a name has been pronounced, the name of master of très petites heures, very small hours, of Queen of France, since the book you see bottom right was illuminated for the Queen of France, and the small details I show you, I think, help to realize how close those different representations are. We have typically same type of figures, same type of faces, and this strange and a little funny hairstyle with something above the head. That's typical of this artist, which was acting and drawing around 1500 in Paris. And one of the particularities of this artist is that he was painting in books, as you see on the one which was illuminated for the Queen of France, but he was also giving models for the arts of the period, and the arts of the period were rather various. He gave model for stained glass, which is an art which exists all along the Middle Ages. He was giving models for tapestries, obviously, but he was also giving models for engravings, and engraving used to illustrate the books, the new medium, we would say now, of the art at this period, end of Middle Ages, beginning of Renaissance time. And so that's give us an idea about this artistic context where some artists were also sort of entrepreneurs and were trying to seize the opportunities given by the media of the works, of the art, but also by the commissioners. And so the commissioner for our tapestries wanted to have an artist who was important in the circles. It was very important since he gave models or painted works for the King and the Queen of France. And we have also this new type of patronage with people who were less important in the society, but who wanted to be to take advantage of those artists and to ask them to give models for the commissions. And so we didn't insist on the fact that the coat of arms you saw on the tapestries as one of Leviste family. We don't know exactly who commissioned them, either Jean Leviste, who died in 1500, either his young cousin named Antoine, but anyhow we are in this circle of new commissioners wanting to have models from the same artist as those one who worked for the court of France. So after this quick presentation of the work, some words about the way they went in Cluny collection, and they were hung in the museum. So maybe you know that those tapestries, we don't know exactly how it came from probably the residence in Paris belonging to this Leviste family, till Boussac Castle in the very center of France, where they were mentioned and described, first by local historians and then by writers like Prosper Mérimée and Georges Sand, who described them. And Prosper Mérimée was heritage buildings inspector, and he persuaded, I'm sure it was not so difficult to persuade the director of Musée de Cluny in those times, Edmond Dussolrat, to buy the tapestries for the French state and for the Musée de Cluny. And that's how, in 1882, the tapestries were acquired for Musée de Cluny. So you see that first they were presented on a wall just in front of the windows, which was not the best way to preserve them for the future. And you see how the richness of the collection led to have the Lady and the Unicorn tapestry on the bottom part of the wall, and the upper part. Those who among you know the collection of Musée de Cluny maybe recognize some of the pieces of the St. Stephen's Story tapestry, which is another very important and rather famous set of tapestries in our museum. So that was the first presentation of the tapestries at the end of 19th century. During World War II, the museum, like all museums in Paris, was closed. And after this period, the director of the museum decided to have a room especially for those tapestries. It was rather new in the history of Musée de Cluny and even in history of French museum. And you see this rotunda with hangings around and above, and a light which is better than the former one, but there is still natural light coming from the ceiling, which again was discovered as not the best way to have good conservation of the tapestry. So in the years 1992-3, a new type of presentation was chosen. The rotunda was still there, so the same place, but with artificial light, which was, of course, better for conservation of the pieces. So, after this short introduction, I would like to give you some information about what we had to do with those tapestries, what decisions we had to make, and what the result we can present now. So those tapestries, I said a moment ago, were acquired by the museum in 1882. They were coming from Boussac Castle, and we know that they were not in such good condition at this period, since, for example, Georges Sand said that they were put down or used for different uses, which were not really the good ones. And so they had to be repaired just after the entrance in the museum's collection. And especially the bottom parts were very much damaged. And you see that the bottom part of the side you have in front of you is clearer, than the upper part of the tapestries. And it's not because they are more ancient, it's on the opposite, because they were restored at the end of 19th century, but with threads which were not dyed with vegetal colors, but with artificial ones, and they are faded quicker than the old threads, the old wool. And you see that very well. That was on this tapestry. That was one of the small discoveries we made when the tapestries were prepared for the intervention. If you remember, the image you saw at the beginning, the bottom part that is seen is smaller than you see on the image. And in fact, when the 19th century restorers wave again the bottom part, they try to give to this piece, which is the smaller one, more or less the same dimension, at least the same height than the others. And that's why they wave the bigger bottom part than for the others. But during another intervention, in the years 1940, 1950, during World War II, it was decided to preserve this bottom part, but to retourner. How do you say that? Not to reverse, to have the bottom part just smaller, then to fold, thank you. To fold the bottom part in order to have visible the same, more or less same dimension as on the others. And so that's an image which was never seen before. We, of course, as you see, we took photographs, and the way the piece is now presented is again the same one as before. And you see also on this part, on this image, that the design of the flowers and above all of the small animals is less refined than the original. And here is, for example, I think a good view of that, since you have a detail of the monkey untouched, with this very fine detail and very refined waving, and on your right, detail of the bottom part of My Only Desire with synthetic colors. So you see how the quality is different. So I was saying that there were several restorations. Main one, end of 19th century. A second one during the years 1940 and World War II. Those restorations, except from the bottom parts I spoke just before, were smaller interventions just to help the threads to be together. And you see that they are local, not very important in dimension, but you can see them rather well. And this is one of the examples where there were also interventions on the faces that you recognize, probably the young lady in My Only Desire. And you see that the original is preserved, but you have interventions which are not light. Sometimes they are a little strong. But we decided not to touch those interventions, except when they were dangerous for the presentation. What was observed when we asked the team of conservators to look at the tapestries and to help us decide what we should do was the fact that the presentation in this rotunda was not a good presentation for the preservation of the tapestries, because the dust was accumulating on the pieces. The rotunda, the circle movement of the walls was causing deformations, and of course with time passing and dust, we had also some loss of intensity in the colors. And I think the two images you have on the screen give you an idea of that. So that's why we were persuaded that we had to have an intervention of restoration. In fact, the intention was not really to have something taking away what was done by the restorers in the years before, but rather to have slight interventions in order to have a better conservation and better presentation. Some of the steps necessary for this intervention, which again were the opportunity to see the tapestries as people of our generation had never seen them. Of course, there were backing, but we discovered that under the backing there were also pieces for consolidation, and the big decision we had to take, considering the state of preservation and the dust, was how to clean them. Did we have just to clean them very slightly, or did we have to wash them? And you know that one can wash tapestries, but with such masterpieces as The Lady and the Unicom, it's not an easy decision to take. Another view of the preparation. And if we decided to wash, we did that after having consulted. We had a team of specialists of tapestry history, but we also had a team of restorers. You see two of them, Sylvie and Anne, preparing the tapestry. And I must say that it was really relieving to have this team of 5 young restorers who love the tapestries, I think, at least as much as we love them. And we are, even if they are young, trained with a good specialty in taking care of tapestries. And I think we have to thank them a lot to have given us those recommendations, and including the one to decide to wash the tapestries. So that was the second step. And some images. There are few places where tapestries of this importance, of this quality, can be washed in Europe, and the main one is in Mechelen, Belgium. And you see the type of intervention. It's very slight, but very light, but very efficient, and the water doesn't stay on the tapestries. It's just go down, and there is a sort of plateau, big thing with holes, which helps the water to go down, not to stay on it. Yes, exactly. Thanks, Antonia. And so that's why we decided that we could take this challenge and decide this way of cleaning the tapestries. And you see that it was useful. And after that, first we were relieved, since they came back in good shape, if I can say that. And there were just last steps of intervention, which were, I think, easier and less important. The question was just to complete the consolidation, which had already been done by the former restorers, just to precise with some threads, just to close some holes, to put pieces of consolidation underneath. Here you see Anne in just acting. And I have brought some other details. The dyes are colors themselves. And so they choose very carefully the colors they use, just to be as close as possible to the old threads. That's a nice detail, I like it very much. One example of one of the places where the intervention has to be a little more important than on the others. You see that the bird of taste, and you see the holes which were created by the damage, and very slight threads which put together the wool ones, just to have better conservation for the future. And you see also on this type of image the difference of color between the face and the back, which is important, but not so as we could have thought. The red of the face is did you say the face or did you say the face? Is not so faded as we could have thought. And to be sure that our intervention was not too risky, we also asked people in the laboratory of French museums to measure the colors. They have now tools which can measure the difference of intensity of the colors in a moment and in another one. So they measured the color before the intervention, before the cleaning, and they measured them again afterwards. And you see how those small points in exactly same color but different places could be measured. And the main conclusion is that generally the colors have not changed. When they have changed, they have gained in intensity, so they have recovered a little of their original intensity. And there are just one or two colors, especially the greens and the modern greens in the bottom part, which are a little faded during this intervention of cleaning. And of course, all this intervention was a wonderful opportunity to make new observations on the tapestries. We knew how refined they are, we knew how the colors are varied, are carefully used, but some observations were made which are, I think, important for the future. You have here a detail of the panthera. You said panthera? Yes. Which in medieval time is white. We know the animal as black nowadays, but in medieval representation it's generally white, and either with stripes, either with spots. And you see here the animal with those spots of different colors, which are easy to see now, and were much damaged just by the fact that there was a sort of a pellicula of dust on the colors. And something which surprised a lot the restorers is the fact that tapestry, the weaving, is, how would I say, without reverse. That's to say that on the opposite to most weavings, at least in 17th, 18th centuries, which they know before, they know more because they have had more opportunities to look at the back of tapestries of this period. The threads have been cut each time it had to pass from a place to another one. And so when you look at the reverse, and you see that rather well on those two images of the side, you have more or less the same, it's reversed of course, but you have the same clarity of the image on the reverse as on the face. And that's something which is rather common as far as we know during the Middle Ages, but was forgotten afterwards. So you ask me why. To my mind, there are several explanations. One is that probably the cost of the work was less important than the cost of the wool. So they wanted to preserve as much as possible the wool. but it's also the fact that they wanted to have high quality work, and it was, of course, more quality if back and face were of same appearance. And there is maybe a third explanation, is that some of the tapestries were, of course, made to be hung on the walls, but sometimes they were not hanging against the wall, but with some space in between, and sometimes they were used to separate two rooms or two parts of one room, and so they had to be seen from the two faces. That's one of the details without restoration, which helps to see this quality of the weaving. Just to show you this bird after the intervention and this very careful restoration. So I was saying that the measurement of colors have allowed us to realize that the cleaning was efficient. The fact that we can observe both face and reverse, or obverse and reverse, shows also, as I said, a fading of the colors, but not as much as we could have thought. And the main colors which have faded are the green and the yellows. And in fact, the greens have faded because of the yellow component of the color. You see that on this small detail of simple flower. And of course, that was also the opportunity to enjoy the quality of many details of the weaving, and the fact that the weavers had the capacity to use all the possibilities offered by their technique, by their art, to represent the figures, the lady, the young lady, but also the animals, and especially the unicom. And you see, for example, here a detail of one of the heads of the unicom, with this very careful and skilly weaving, which allows us to represent both the head, but also the details and the pelage. What is the pelage? The fur. It's not only an animal with the fur, but the beard and all those details. They knew how to weave in the form, and that also you can appreciate it with another detail of the unicom, the horn itself here, with this very refined way of weaving to give the torso of the dorsal of the horn. You see also in such a detail what I said before, is that the fact that the yellows are faded more than most of the other colors. So the horn was really yellow, and it's now rather quite black, quite white, just yellowish. There's delicate effects of movement, for example, those pine trees with a sort of air blowing in the leaves, and which I think is also a good example of the skill of those weavers. I like also this detail of one of the animals with this sort of movement of the surface, and given the aspect of the fleece of the animal, of the sheep. And I like also very much those details which show you the effects of transparency with a technique which mix several colors to give the aspect of the veil, which is covering the very nicely combed hair of the young lady. So, I said beginning that this intervention was also leading to a new presentation of the tapestries. The restorers insisted when they examined the tapestries at the beginning that, of the operation, that rotunda was not a good way of presenting them for a good conservation for the future. And it was another decision difficult to take for us, because we knew that this rotunda was very much appreciated by the public, sort of intimacy with the pieces, sort of allusion to an old tent. This one was something that people generally liked very much. So we were aware that probably there would be some disappointment if we would decide to give up with this rotunda and to have a more square room for better presentation of the pieces. And so anyhow we took the decision for what we thought to be the more important, the conservation of the pieces. And we also decided to follow the example which has been given by some museums, especially in Munich, who present the tapestries not on flat and straight walls, but on slightly inclined supports in order to light le poids. The weight, thank you very much. The weight of the tapestries and to limit the deformation. So that's why we have decided to use those type of support. And what you see on the images at the right is the introduction to this new room. In fact, the place is exactly the same as before, but the design, the architecture of the room is different. We asked to the architect who is the monument historic architect, the heritage architect in charge of our buildings, to design the new room. And if there is this ramp going to the room, it's not to increase the mystery, it's just because this room will be at the connection between one part of the first floor and another one. And with this ramp, we'll have totally access for disabled people at the whole floor. So that was the first step for us for the new conception of the museography, and with total accessibility. It's more complicated to access to this floor, but as far as access to this first floor will be possible, the whole first floor will be easily seen thanks to the ramp which leads to this new room. And so we have decided to cover the walls of this ramp with just discrete decoration and some quotations from some of the authors who have mentioned the unicom. So if we have just 5-10 minutes, I would like also to seize the opportunity to be with you to give you some hints of the other parts of the project for the museum we are leading now. So I was saying that this new room, or this renewed room for the Lady and the Unicorn is for us sort of step toward a total renovation of the museum. And in fact, the project has several parts. There is a part which is dealing with restoration of the building. It's now begun, and it will last at least 2 years, till 2017. We'll also build a new entrance, because if we want to have this accessibility I was mentioning a moment ago, we need to have lifts, and to have lifts, it's very difficult to have them in the ancient buildings. So we have a new one, including elevators. And after that, we'll have a new museography. So as you see, we have begun now works which will last at least till 2019, probably till 2020. And I would like just to show you the images of the other operation which has been led recently. In fact, we reopened the chapel last September, so 2 months ago. You see those two images of the outside, and you see another example of the good effect of cleaning, this time not on tapestry, not on wool, but on the wall of the chapel. And so the improvement is rather obvious, but you will see, yes, this detail of the sculpture. But the improvement is also rather obvious inside the chapel. And we had sort of great surprise when we discovered that the interior of the Gothic vault, which was seen as greenish, brownish, quite brown, dark brown, in fact, after cleaning, revealed as a sort of blue, slightly green. So probably Jacques d'Amboise, who who is abbot of Cluny when the hotel was built and the chapel was erected and decorated. And we don't know if he was the one who asked, but he had a chapel with a blue ceiling. And we have now a chapel with a blue ceiling. You have a chapel with a blue ceiling when you come and visit the museum. So some details also about the restoration of the Alps paintings. We have the examples of mural paintings 15th or end of 15th century in Paris are very rare, and we are happy enough to have those very beautiful paintings in the Alps. So you see first how there were some it was looked by the restorers what was under the dust, and so we realized that the restoration could be led and could give good effects, and the two other details show you during the restoration the difference between the part which has been touched and the one which hasn't been, and you see how efficient it is. So restoration of the buildings, the 15th and the 15th century one, the Hôtel Elisabeth de Cluny, we have seen the chapel, and there is also a great operation conducted on the Roman baths. Here it's cleaning and it's protecting from rain and other agents of deterioration. So you have here two views of the bath, of the walls before the intervention, and you see also inside we have some vestige of old Roman painting inside one of the rooms with old and very bad way of covering it. You see on the two details. There's something missing. I thought I brought detail of the wall after cleaning. So anyhow, they are now in the operation of cleaning inside and outside those Roman walls. And so that's operations of restoration of the building, and I was saying that we also have now in course the construction of a new entrance, and there was competition to choose the architect for this operation, for this new entrance. And Bernard Desmoulins, who is one architect rather specialized in those type of intervention inside or next to old buildings, has been chosen. I think it's really a good choice, since, as you may discover on the image on the upper part of the screen, he designed something which is both original, it's not a pastiche, but which also integrates, I think, very well in the environment without being too important in size and without hitting the old buildings. And I brought also two images of the project for the interior, and I'm persuaded that one of the good elements of this project is this staircase, which, to my mind, is rather elegant. So those are the operations which are now in course of realization, since this new building should be finished towards the end of next year, the end of 2017. And during the same moment, we are now working on the new museography. Again, the competition has been organized, and the team who is chosen includes the same architect, Bernard Desmoulins, and another one who is specialized in museography more, whose name is Adrien Garbert. And we are rather hopeful. We think that we hope that they will work well together, and that we will work well with them. The idea being to reopen, to open the new entrance and to reopen part of the galleries during the year 2018, with so part of the new museography, and to have this finished the year after, 2019 or 2020. So as you see, we are rather busy, but it's, I think, very stimulating for the whole team of the museum, and it's a pleasure for me to speak about to speak about that and to tell you some of the operations we are now leading. So thanks for listening to me. And of course, if you have some questions, and if I may, I'll be glad to answer.